Welcome to Team Building Cultures, the podcast designed to deliver tools and tips for improving team communication, collaboration, and fostering a culture where teams thrive. Now, here's your host, Beverly Hathorn, owner of Strategic HR Consultants.
Hello, team builders, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Team Building Cultures. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Mr. Kevin Cahill. Kevin is an award-winning sales professional and consultant, specializing in the art of managing change and achieving great results. As the founder of the Change Revolution, this international best-selling author and speaker inspires men and women alike. As someone who has mastered the art of resilience and hope, Kevin's philosophy as the clarity builder is strategic and results driven. Kevin's passion is to equip individuals and organizations with a renewed sense of clarity and excitement, knowing that positive change will bring about positive gains. I like that. Positive change will bring about positive gains. His exciting creation, The Change Revolution, offers a winning blueprint for navigating through change and achieving success. No one wants to change. We all know that change is hard, but change is the only constant. And today, the rate of change is faster than ever. There's power in realizing that change can be initiated at any time, and nothing needs to be wrong in order to actualize change. So, to surf on top of the tsunami of change, rather than get crushed by it, your mindset is your most critical asset. Every system of life is circumambulating these four questions, which are built into the human experience. So, Kevin's going to talk to us today about how do we face change? How do we move through change? How do we accept joy? And how do we mature and serve? Well, this is going to be a very exciting and interesting discussion, Kevin, and thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to this.
Well, thank you very much for having me as a guest today. I'm truly honored.
Yeah, so that's great. So let's just jump right into it and tell us, how do we go about facing change, especially that change that we didn't anticipate, initiate, or don't appreciate?
And as in the opening, that is one of those things that the systems of life really do circumambulate every single aspect of change. And it's true, none of us want to change. Most of us will run away at the prospect of change. If the universe is trying to guide us along, so many people will numb themselves with alcohol or drugs or TV or eating or shopping because they don't want to have to look in the mirror and face themselves and whatever change is coming their way. And one of the things that I always like to stress is all change can be either good or bad, and all change is loss, and all loss needs to be grieved. So simple things like getting a promotion at work. Well, that is change. That is potentially more money, potentially more responsibility, maybe more perks. So yes, it's a good change, but there's still a loss. There's still a loss of the old identity. There's still a loss of the old routine, of the old workspace, of the old work environment. And what a lot of individuals forget is that regardless of the change, whether it's good or bad, it still needs to be grieved. It still needs to be understood. And it needs to be, in essence, packaged away so that we can move forward. And as I talk about, the four stages of change, how do you prepare for change? How do you go through suffering? How do you find joy in the suffering? And then mature and serve. How do you mature and serve? And I'm up here, in Canada, and we're blessed with four distinct seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. And a big part of everything I speak to can be described with nature and with what's going on around. Every year, we have autumn, fall, the leaves are changing. Nature is telling us to prepare for darkness. The days are getting longer. The leaves are falling off the trees. We're seeing death and the preparation for cold, dark winter, the suffering of nature, the suffering of our lives. So when I focus on how do you prepare for change, every single element along our journey of life is preparing us for the darkness. Everything from the time we are, born, and some now are focusing on the topic of epigenetics, which is the study of how trauma from before we were born is impacting our genetic code. Everything we see our parents do, our schools, our teachers, society, everything is teaching us how to get through the pain, how to get through the darkness. But most humans are not as diligent as the squirrels or the rodents that are, focused on gathering their nuts and hibernating and preparing for the long winter. The fable of the grasshopper and the ant. The grasshopper made fun of the ant for taking all that time to store up food for the dark months ahead. And that's what all of going through suffering is we go through it, we are thrown into it, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or our partner cheats on us and leaves us, or we get fired, or we're in an accident of no fault of our own, and all of a sudden we're in it. We're in the proverbial shit pile of life, and we have no control. We did not choose to be there. We did everything in our power to avoid being there, but the universe guided us. And I talk about, sometimes it's a silent hand of the universe. Sometimes it's a silent nudge. And for some of us, it escalates into the silent sledgehammer over the head because we're not paying attention. And what I find with so many individuals that I work with is this journey of life is not a straight line from beginning to end. It's very much a spiral. And we keep coming back to the same things over and over and over again. We keep being tested in pain and suffering and darkness. And it might look a little different, but the theme is the same. And we keep being tested until we figure out the lesson. And then once we figured out the lesson of the pain, of the darkness, we are able to move forward. Mm-hmm. But in order to move forward, it's essential. In order to come out of winter, we have to go into spring. Summer doesn't follow winter. It's always spring up here. The grass starts growing again. The birds are back. They're laying eggs. The bunny rabbits are having their million children. And that's finding joy out of suffering. We went through the darkness. We went through the chaos and the disarray and the disorder and the disorganization. But now we've got this newness. And so when someone comes to me and says, they just got fired, or they're getting divorced, or they just got diagnosed with cancer, in my mind, the first thing I can think about is, I don't say this to them because no one wants to hear it, but the first thing I think about is, I am so excited for you because I'm excited to see what newness is going to be birthed out of this disaster. Right up here in North America, Northern Canada, we've got forest fires pretty much all across the country. Same, some of the southern states. And a forest needs to have a fire in order to get rid of old growth, in order for new growth to come. But what I find for so many individuals is if they don't find the joy in the suffering, and they don't find the lesson, and they don't find the meaning, The universe has this wonderful way of throwing you back into suffering again. So if you don't see that, I got fired, but now I've got this opportunity where I can follow my dreams and I can follow my passion and do what I want. Or, that partner of mine left me, but now I'm in this new relationship and I've never felt more alive. If we don't find those moments of joy, then we won't be able to get out of suffering. But then that leads us to summer. We're up here in the Northern Hemisphere. We're, I think, 3 or 4 days from the first day of summer. And that is truly to mature and serve. Because if you cannot use the learning from your pain, the learning from your suffering to help someone else, then what was the point of going through it in the first place? How can you use that experience that you went through to hold a light for someone else that's in the darkness? To be a lighthouse for someone else that's, experiencing turbulent seas and can't see 3 feet in front of their face. That's the whole purpose of change. That's the whole purpose of pain and suffering, is to hold a light for someone else that's going through it.
I very much see your perspective and agree with you a great deal, especially when you talk about how nature prepares for the change. A squirrel does not have a calendar, can't tell time. I don't think. I mean, but a squirrel, but he innately knows when it's time to gather his nuts. And I have a really large yard and there's lots of trees back there. And I see the squirrels in the fall, and that's a whole coordinated activity. To some, it might look like chaos, but it's a completely coordinated activity that they go about, and they know what time and when to start this activity. And then by the same, they know when to reverse that activity and start, gathering or whatever. So it's really interesting how nature does prepare. And I shy to think that if nature would prepare a little tiny squirrel, then certainly it would prepare me for change. So we're prepared for change if we just kind of follow through on what we know. I happen to be one that believes there's growth and change, much like the perspective that you're submitting to us today. I believe that there's growth and change. I believe there's opportunity and there's excitement and change. But so often the change comes about, as I mentioned in the beginning, unappreciated, unplanned for, we're unprepared for it. And therefore we kind of clam up against it and we don't really see the value or the benefit in it. So when you talk about the darkness of winter, I happen to love winter because it's, when Christmas comes, and I'm still the child at heart, but I happen to love winter, and I love the season, the reason for the season. And I love the fall. I like the coziness of it. I like the activities that we partake in the fall. So it's one of my favorite times of the year, but then all times of the year, my favorite. I love my year's period. I've come to appreciate all that change. But how do we, for instance, with the loss of a job that we were very good at, we were the SME at, we were proud of, we'd been there for a long time, we enjoyed our team, we enjoyed the work, and then suddenly, in the whoosh of a pen, that is gone. And we see that as suffering. How do we move through that suffering?
So there's a couple things that I what you just said that I really want to speak to, and I think that I'll probably bring it all back. Speaking of the birth of Christmas and the winter solstice, because that is, the deepest, darkest of the nights. And one of the challenges for so many humans is ego. So, as you said, The squirrel just knows what to do. The trees in your yard just know what to do. And I don't know what kind of trees you have, but let's say you have a maple tree in your backyard and there's an oak tree 7 feet away. Well, the maple tree, doesn't rely on the oak tree to tell it what to do. It doesn't rely on the other trees to tell it when to grow its leaves, or when to absorb the sunlight, to use photosynthesis and to convert it into nutrient to be able to grow. It just knows how to do it. So for humans, when we are thrown into suffering, losing a job, the number one mistake that we all make when we are leading with ego is making the assumption that we are in control of our destiny, that we can micromanage and manipulate our personal situation. And most of us get in our own way and make everything worse. And my tagline is love the life you were meant to lead. Not the life that mom and dad told you should lead, not the life that society tells you should lead, not the life that you have created in your head that you want to follow, but the life that you are being led on. This movie, Wizard of Oz, book, movie, perfect example of the 4 parts of change, in addition to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Dorothy, under no control of her own, is swept up in a hurricane or a tornado and thrown into another land. And Dorothy was forced to go on a journey following a path that was presented to her one brick at a time, where she was forced to come face to face with the 3 worst qualities of herself. The Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion were her personality downfalls. And she had to face them in order to be able to move forward. Where Toto, the dog, completely tuned in to the mysteries of the universe, much like the squirrels in your backyard, was there to guide her along the way. But then she got to the end of the path. She was focused on getting to an end result to realize it was only an illusion in the first place. And isn't that so true of so many people that are about to die, that are on their deathbed? They talk about the regrets and they talk about, what they missed out on life. And it is truly the illusion. And I, like you, I love the Christmas season. But I love it for a little different reason than, what is first presented in biblical terms. And I love everything in the Bible, but I love the history of where it really started. And in, early, couple 50, 60 years after Jesus' death, you've got Christian missionaries that are exploring the world and taking the message where they went. And as they crossed the Mediterranean and they came into Celtic countries, meeting with pagans and finding out about their rituals. And everything really in the Bible is tied to the cosmos. You've got the Christian missionaries telling the story of the birth of the Son of God, and the pagans talking about their festival that are, about the birth of the sun, S-U-N, the sun in the sky. And there you have the birth of Christmas. And it's such a powerful story because Christmas was always tied to the winter solstice. The winter solstice being the darkest night of the year. And pagans would celebrate and they would pray for the sun to come back to them. It was the darkest, it was the coldest night of the year. And isn't that the same story of the Christian story of the birth of Jesus? You've got the darkest night. And in the Jesus story, you know, the angels, they appeared in the dark night to the shepherds. And the shepherds in the time of Jesus in the Roman Empire were the lowest of the low. They were the outcasts of society. They were the robbers and the rapists and the horrible people that had been exiled from the community. And if you hang out with sheep and you come back into town, everyone can see you, or smell you rather, because that was the symbol of how bad these people were. So the proclamation of the birth of Jesus was given to the lowest people on earth first, in the darkest night, with a radiant star that they followed to find a baby in a manger. Again, back to early Roman times, animals were unclean. If you were associated with being with an animal or sleeping in a stable, you would be completely exiled from your community. And so that story, tied with the birth of the Son, and when we originally followed the Julian calendar, there, everything kept moving, and the actual Christmas became further away from the winter solstice. So when the Pope Gregory decided to change the calendar, and we have the Gregorian calendar now, Christmas was specifically put right after the winter solstice to keep the tradition of Christmas tied to nature. And it is such a powerful reminder that, again, in suffering and the story of Jesus's birth, if you are in a manger or hanging out with smelly animals, just keep going, because that's not where the story ends. The story does not end in the darkness. The Jesus story starts in the darkness. The first line of the Old Testament, darkness. And then the end of the Bible, at the end of Revelations, we're back in a garden. We're back where it's beautiful. And we're ready to do it all over again.
That's a wonderful conceptualization and a great perspective to bring a response to my question, how do we move through suffering? So, what I'm hearing you say to us is that, one, love the life you were meant to live. Don't look to the left and look to the right and see all those things that weren't meant for you. Love the direction you're going in and follow in that direction. And most importantly, I hear you saying the darkness is not always the darkness that is meant to destroy. The darkness brings life, light comes forth in the darkness. So that's a really great perspective. And, for us to understand moving through suffering and how to keep going, that's just the beginning. That can be some time where newness is birth. I've always said there's growth in change. So what I'm hearing you is an elaboration of that. I feel like there's growth. I feel like there's opportunity and development and change. So, but I had to learn that. That was not something that came easy. It came from changes in my life eventually I look back and think, oh, well, I'm glad that happened. Whereas I thought that was a really horrible thing. I'm looking back and thinking what a good thing it was for me. So thank you for that. That was really great, the way you brought that to us. So if that's how we move through suffering, how do we then accept joy without letting our egos get in the way? Because you've made a very good point about our egos. How then do we bring about joy without letting that ego get in the way?
And exactly what you just said is, for yourself, it took many different iterations of suffering to be able to learn the lesson. And same with myself. I would say a good 10 years of the universe just challenging me and testing me. And, those laying on the bathroom floor crying moments before I finally said, I give up. I surrender to, and whether it's divine, God, universe, the great unknown, the power that is bigger than me, to be able to surrender and then be able to find the joy. And finding the joy, it starts with the simple noticing what is around. And again, I'll go back to that squirrel in your backyard. What a miraculous, wonderful thing to be able to witness. And, for me, it started with accepting the smallness and the insignificantness of us. Yes, we are all created equal and unique and special, but we are sitting on this massive rock that has been around for billions of years, hurtling through space at a constant speed, always going forward. And that rock will be here long after I'm gone. And that is the wondrous aspect of nature. Just to be able to, step back and be an observer and notice with awe and wonder simple things like a rainbow created in a very specific moment that is only observable from a specific angle away from where the sun and the water are intersecting. And to me, that is just mind-boggling. Some might say, well, it's unbelievable, but it's, to me, it's believable because you can see it. And that's really where it starts. The joy of being able to take a pause, get out of your own head, appreciate a baby's laughter or going for a walk in nature. And I'm a big Ed Sheeran fan, and his concert was just in Toronto this weekend, and I was there on Saturday night. And his new album came out at the beginning of May, and there's one song called Dusty. And when he describes where the song came from, is he was in this really dark space. A friend had died, his wife was diagnosed with cancer. There was a lawsuit against him for infringement, and all of those things happened within a month. And all things that I, could somewhat relate to, because when the universe tests you, it really usually does throw many things at you to see how strong you are, to see how much you can carry. And so the song came about because he would go to bed at night crying, 2-3 o'clock in the morning. But then daybreak, sun's coming up, and his daughter, a few years old, would come bounding into bed with this exuberant energy, just wanting to be with her dad. And so that paradox of suffering and joy happened for him and a song came out of it. And I hear so often, tragedies in the world, terrorism and bombings and famine and child poverty. And so many people will say, where is God in those moments? How can God let, a 12-year-old child die of cancer? What kind of a God would do that? And it's a tough question. It's a tough question for anyone to answer, even the most spiritual. But in every element of life, there's a lesson to be learned. And in my own darkness, one of the things that I learned, that I found comfort in, that I believe, and it helps me get through a day, is that God is standing in the darkness with me, waiting for me to emerge. And to me, that's just such a powerful thought, that it's not some, God that is only good and, the best of, but it's also for those horrible moments. And then that leads to the next part, right? Of when I said earlier, of being a light bearer for someone else in the darkness. And all too often, I will hear stories of, people that are in the gutters of life, that they're at the end of their rope. And all of a sudden, someone comes into their life that inspires them or encourages them or simply just even smiles and sits in silence with them. And to me, that's how I was able to find joy. I would never wish some of the things I went through on my worst enemy, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, because it brought me to this moment.
Well, those are really wonderful perspectives and things you've given us to think about today, Kevin. I really like that you tied change into nature, which change and nature are one and the same, but you've helped us understand that a change doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. You have no control of it most of the time, and not to let your egos get in the way, and understand that you're living the life that you were intended to live. So every change, or most change, is a redirection. Maybe you've gotten off path, or maybe it's keeping you on path. But these changes are necessary, and they're just a part of life. And so embrace those and find the good things in those. So that's particularly, I think, important for our leadership teams and the workforce, because as long as you're working in a corporation or organization or a business, there is going to be change. Change is the only thing that's consistent. So the better you learn how to deal with that and how to manage that, the better off you'll be. So I'm hoping that you have some form of an offer or something to help expand on that and help our listeners maybe connect with you and learn more about your perspectives on change.
Definitely. And I offer to all, it's a free 91-day understanding change e-course delivered to your inbox daily. And it really guides the reader through a very simple, quick exercises and tips. Great way to start the day, 5 minutes, understanding mostly fear, the fear of change, understanding the psychology of fear, and then learning some really simple tricks, tips, and techniques to be able to get through the fear of change and be able to find the joy out of the change.
Awesome. And how can they reach you if they want to just communicate or just check out and see what you're up to?
My website is kevintcahill.com. I'm there and I'm on most of the social media platforms, except TikTok. I'll leave that one for the younger generation.
Okay. Well, I will be sure to add that to our promotional materials. So, Kevin Cahill, an award winning sales professional and consultant specializing in the art of change and achieving great results through those change. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that my listeners have gleaned a great deal from our discussion. So, thank you so much.
And again, thank you for having me. I really, truly enjoyed meeting you and having this conversation together today.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Team Building Cultures. We hope we have delivered helpful and enlightening information to help you create your dream team. Join us next time.